Welcome back to Talking Sports with Brandon. This is the Week 14 NFL recap video. If you didn't check out the videos from last week, where we did the preview video to Week 14 and also the Cowboys video, definitely check that out. Make sure to watch those videos. But a lot of stuff happened in Week 14, to be honest. So we had a big injury to one quarterback in the NFC West, and we had some other playoff, I guess, implications that came into effect in this week with some certain teams that are fighting for a wild card spot, in the hunt for a wild card spot, or teams that could just move down in seeding as well if they're most likely locked into a playoff spot, but their seeding could be changed. So definitely a lot of things happened. We're going to cover all of it, and we're going to start with our 5 picks from the week, which. Not a good week again, to be honest. A terrible week, and when I go into some of them, I'll kind of explain, kind of what I thought was going to happen, but just not a good week, to be honest. We went 1-4 this week. I'm just gonna say it flat out, not try and put it through and see who won, who didn't. If you didn't remember what the picks were, but we went 1-4, so our record's 31, 36, and 3 on the season. It's just been a struggle all season, and despite having some okay weeks, some good weeks the last couple weeks, it's just the last 2 weeks have not been good. And we're back to 5 games under with only a couple weeks left. So really got to make something happen if we want to go back over 500. But it's going to be tough. But we start with the first game, which was the only win, the only one of the week. Browns Bengals. I had the Bengals minus 5.5. Bengals win 23-10. This one, again, I said Joe Burrow never beat the Browns in his career. He was 0-4, had been really bad against the Browns, to be honest. And again, they got destroyed earlier this year on Monday night. So I just thought it would, that slide would end. The Bengals have been hot. They're that dark horse team for a Super Bowl appearance, even in a AFC where you have the Bills and the Chiefs. You look at the Bengals and you think, like, that's a team that could make the Super Bowl in back-to-back years. Obviously, they made it last year, and it made sense. Mixon was back for this game. Chase played a full game in this one. They actually didn't have T. Higgins in this game, or I think Tyler Boyd, but the T. Higgins one wasn't really announced until I think Tyler Boyd did play. He just got injured. T. Higgins said he was going to play, and then in pregame warmups he couldn't go. So Chase, it was all in Chase. He had a monster game, 10 for 119 and a touchdown. Burrow had a good game, 240, 2 touchdowns and a pick. But yeah, they went 23-10 again. Again, Watson, it's going to take time. I don't know if at any point this season he's going to look, not what he was the last time we saw him play, but anywhere close to that guy you think he is, just because, again, you take 2 years off football. It's just, you're not going to be the same player. It's just, no matter who you are. I don't care how talented you are, how great you were the last time we saw you, what position you play. You're just not going to be the same player as soon as you come back. So I don't know for the remaining games left in the season if he'll look like that, but I knew it wasn't going to be in this game. And he looked better. He definitely looked better in this game than he did against the Texans, but still wasn't great. Still was missing throws. Had another interception. But it just didn't look the same guy. And honestly, Nick Chubb really doesn't look like the same guy. I don't know if that's because, they've been down in games a couple of times lately, but he, 14 carries, 34 yards. Like, he really hasn't been that good as of late. Hasn't had like a monster game. Still third in rushing in the league, but his last couple games, 34 this game, 80 last game. He had 116 against the Bucks, which was good, but only 4.5 yards per carry. Not great for someone like him. 19 yards against the Bills, 63 yards against the Dolphins. So he hasn't really been amazing. That's at least 4 of the last 5 games where he's been under 80 yards. So it's a little concerning. But again, for the Browns, they needed this game to possibly stay in. If they're 6-7, you have a chance. But 5-8, they're done. Bengals 9-4. The Ravens, they won as well. So they're both 9-4. Ravens obviously already beat the Bengals, so that's why they are technically first in that division. But that's going to come down to the wire. The Ravens, the Bengals are a better team than the Ravens, no doubt. Especially, Lamar's not playing right now, but even with him in there, they're still a better team. The Ravens' offense is just very hit or miss, just not a good offense. And the defense is okay, enough. They've kind of been helped out by some opponents recently, but And it kind of stays that way because they play the Browns, they play the Falcons, they play the Steelers, and the Bengals last week. So it wouldn't be surprising to see both these teams most likely at the same record. Maybe the Bengals have one more win, but it's most likely going to come down to that final game to see who wins this division. I think it would be kind of disappointing if the Bengals didn't win this division because, again, they are the better team and they got off to the slow start. They were 0-2. Obviously, they're 9-2 in their last 11 games, which that's really the team they should have been. Those first two games, 4 picks in the first game. You lose at Dallas on a game-winning field goal. But again, they were losing that entire game, so it's not like they choked the lead. And again, you look at the Ravens side as well. I mean, those first handful of weeks, they either won every game or were leading in every single game and then choked at the last second. I mean, that Dolphins game, they were up the entire game, choked at the last minute. Some other games, the Giants game, like a lot of games that they gave away. So they can look back at their season as well and say, for how a non-productive our offense has been, our defense has been good enough. Like, the fact that we are 9-4 is pretty impressive, but we easily could have been better than that just because we gave away so many leads. But that's going to be a great matchup in the last week of the season because, again, that's most likely going to decide who will be the division winner, whether it is a full tiebreaker where they have the same record or one team has one more win, and then we see what happens. But, yes, that was my first game of the week. That was the only win. So now we go to the losses. Vikings-Lions, I guess I fell into the trap of it where the Lions were favored in this game despite the 10-2 Vikings coming into their building. I took Minnesota plus 1.5, and they just got outclassed. I mean, I'm not the biggest believer in Minnesota as being like a true Super Bowl threat. I don't think really any team or any person believes that, but I still think they're a more talented team. I do think that they do have talent on the offense, no doubt. And the offense had a good game, despite only putting up 23 points. If I didn't say the score, it was 34-23. But despite only putting up 23 points, they were moving the ball. They just could not score. I mean, Kirk Cousins, 31 of 41, 425, 2 touchdowns. Jefferson had 223 yards. It's not that really wasn't the problem, and despite them only putting up 23 points, which kind of seems weird because of just the amount of offense that they did show, but they also had 2 lost fumbles, which obviously hurt. They had a couple drops as well, so that's really why the offense wasn't up there. But the whole thing around their whole thing around their team is their defense. This defense has too much talent on the team to be this bad. It's one of the worst defenses in the league. I think people think that it is better because you see names on their defense: Darius Smith and Danielle Hunter, Harrison Smith, Patrick Peterson, despite being older, still pretty solid. So I think you see names like that and you just think they got to be at least a decent unit. They're not one of the worst teams, but they really are one of the worst defenses. And, obviously you have Mike Zimmer for all those years. He's obviously a defensive guy. They're always in the top half of the league, if not top 5, top 7 in the league defensively. And obviously with him gone this year, the offense has ticked up and the defense has gone down with Kevin O'Connell being an offensive guy and calling the plays, or at least having a big impact on the offense. So I don't know if that's the reason, because it is it's mostly the same team, and you did get Darius Smith this season. I think he has 10 plus sacks. So it's just weird. They just can't stop people defensively. And to be fair, the Lions do have one of the better offenses in the league. It is a kind of crazy statement to say, but they do. They can move the ball down the field. And Goff had a great game in this one. 330, 3 touchdowns, no picks. He looked comfortable all day. Didn't even get sacked once. He just looked really good in this game. They also ran for 130 on the ground. So it was a really impressive day for them on offense. But again, the Vikings, if you do believe that they have a shot in the playoffs, could they win a game in the playoffs? Maybe. It depends who they play. If they play a Giants, a Washington in that first round, I think that they can beat one of those teams, but it's not like they're going to blow them out or win very comfortably. I think it would be a close, tough kind of game. I think Washington, I could definitely see them losing to. I think Giants they'd most likely beat, but I think Washington could definitely beat them, no doubt. So definitely concerns for Minnesota. And like I said, I fell into that trap of, they're an underdog in this game despite being on the road, but they probably are the better team anyways, at least more talented. That's what I was saying when I made that pick. I was like, they are more talented than Detroit, but they just did not play up to that talent on the defensive side. And again, the 2 fumbles obviously cost them a lot. So 1-1 after 2 games. third game, this one just hurt. This one should have been a win. I almost chalked it up as a win at one point in this game, but it's Chiefs Broncos. Chiefs minus 9.5. They're up 27-0 in the second quarter of this game with 4 minutes 30 seconds left. They're up 27-0. They win the game 34-28. Unbelievable, because I said the stats going in. Mahomes has never lost to the Broncos in his career, and the way that the Broncos are playing, they could barely put up points. They average like 15 a game. The defense is, obviously really good, but in the way that the Chiefs lost last week, I knew that they were going to come back heavy this week, and they did. They put up 27 points to start the game, and I said this game's over. There's no way they don't cover this. In those final 4 minutes and 32 seconds of the first half, the Broncos scored 2 touchdowns. Unbelievable. In 4 minutes, 30 seconds, they basically scored their season average for points. And then first drive of the second half, they get another touchdown to make it 27-21. And all of a sudden, I don't even know if the Chiefs can cover. Chiefs do get another touchdown to make it 34-21 right at the end of the third quarter, but then the Broncos get a late touchdown. It was in the fourth quarter. It wasn't like it was a minute left, but to make it 34-28. And then the Chiefs definitely had chances to maybe kick a field goal, because I guess it only would have got to 9. So I guess I'm kind of glad it didn't, because again, I had 9.5. So it would have hurt more if they only won by 9. But they definitely had chances to go get touchdowns. But Mahomes threw 3 picks in this game, so kind of tough to score more points when you give the ball away 3 times. It was just a tough loss, to be honest, because it just seemed like an automatic win. Even Russell Wilson comes out with a concussion in the second half of this game, so just a chance to that offense that's struggling a lot to even kind of pound them in the ground even more without Russell Wilson in there. It was having a good game. He was 250, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick. That 1 pick was for a pick 6, but he definitely one of his better games of the season. If he finished the game, maybe, who knows? Maybe things go differently. It was 27-21 at one point. I think he did. I think he got injured on that drive, I'm pretty sure. So definitely a chance to, who knows, maybe make it more of a game. But that was just a tough beat right there. So 1-2 after that one. Dolphins, Chargers. I just missed completely on this. I had Dolphins minus 3.5. Not even close. They lose 23-17, but if you watch that game, they were awful. Tua at one point was 3 of 17. He finished the game 10 of 28 through the air. On the ground, they actually weren't bad on the ground, but it was still only 92 yards. It was just 5 yards per carry, but they just didn't run the ball enough. Again, they were losing most of the game, but they just couldn't do anything offensively. Tua, like I said, Tua was awful. The only guy who did anything was Tyreek. He had a 60-yard touchdown pass, but even still, that was like late in the game. And then he also had like a 57-yard fumble recovery for a touchdown. That was the only way they could have scored points at that point in the game, was something random and crazy happening, because they could not move the ball. The Chargers defense isn't even good, and they could not do anything. So I thought that coming off of last week, where they got pretty beat down, Tua looked really bad last week against the 49ers. They're playing the Chargers, a worse defense, a team that you could definitely beat, a team coming off a loss. It just didn't happen, though, in this one. So Dolphins go to 8-5. Chargers go to 7-6 all of a sudden. Now they're, I think they're tied. The Patriots won, so I think maybe they did come out of a playoff spot. But they're right there in the hunt. They got to win, their games. They got to at least get to 9, but you probably got to get to 10. You have 4 games left against the Titans, the Colts, the Rams, and the Broncos. All those games are winnable. There's no doubt all those games are winnable. Yeah, I think you got to win 3 of those. I said you got to get to 9. That's at the minimum. I think you really got to get to 10. And they have the talent to do it. I think, with Mike Williams back, Keenan Allen back now, Mike Williams is really the X factor in that offense, because despite Keenan Allen being the better player, Mike Williams is that guy you can throw 50-50 balls to. You can go deep with him. He's going to make contested catches. He kind of brings another dynamic to that offense. So with him, Allen, and Eckler all healthy, despite the offensive line being bad and not playing well, you can still get past it with those guys. So I think with them healthy, if the defense looks like that, which it won't continue to look like that, but if it looks, little pieces of that, and with Joey Bosa coming back, which could be very, very soon, maybe not this week, but maybe the week after, who knows? One of these weeks he's going to be back. all of a sudden you look a lot better. I'm not saying they'll win, multiple playoff games, maybe not even one, but you can definitely get into a playoff spot with the strength of schedule you have left, your team getting healthier, and starting to look a little bit better as a team. And I think this win possibly could have saved Staley's job. If they lose this game, you're 6-7, or you're 6-7. Or excuse me, you're 6-7, and who knows? Maybe the team kind of just gives up a little bit. Whoever knows what happens for those remaining games. But definitely a big win for the Chargers. But in terms of my pick, just not a good pick right there. And then final game, I had Patriots Cardinals. I had Cardinals plus 1.5. I think this game goes differently if Kyler doesn't get injured. He tears his ACL on the third play of the game, so he's obviously out for the season. He's going to miss a lot of next year as well. But third play of the game, he tears the ACL. I think the game's different if he finishes it. I think they had a really good chance to win this game. The Pats did not look good early in this game. They even lost from Ramondre Stevenson. They lost Devontae Parker. They came in with no Jacoby Myers. They were missing guys on their team. It was definitely a chance to get a win off them. And once Barkley came in, they definitely kept it close. They were up 13-10 at half, but as soon as the second half started, it was over. The Cardinals had no offense. They even had DeAndre Hopkins fumbled, and they returned it for a touchdown. So it was just over at that point. The Pats had at least like 6 sacks in this game, I want to say. 6 sacks for 45 yards. They were getting after him. Colt McCoy threw a pick. So it was just ugly once the second half started. I think if Kyler's in that game, the way he could, like I was saying when I made the pick, his mobility is going to be huge to escape from the pass rushers, make plays. Again, Hollywood Brown's back. You have DeAndre Hopkins. I think that they would have been poised to really compete in this game and I think win this game. So it sucks that it happened because if it doesn't, I think it goes way differently. But the Pats, they go 7-6, like I was saying, with the Chargers winning. I think the Chargers technically are out of a playoff spot because of that. But it was a huge win for the Pats. They really needed that because if they lose that, again, they're 6-7, and they're probably done, to be honest, because they're barely hanging on anyways. That defense is carrying them, and it was just a huge win for them. But just to say the standings in the playoffs, because we are getting really close to that point, it is the Bills, start with the AFC. It is the Bills as the 1 seed, 10-3. Chiefs 2 seed, 10-3. Baltimore, again, they're same record as Cincinnati, but they have the tiebreaker over them. So Baltimore is at 3 spot at 9-4. Tennessee 7-6. We'll talk about them in just a little bit. Cincinnati's slotted in at that 5 spot at 9-4. Miami 8-5 and at 6, and then New England is 7-6 in the 7 spot, and then you have the Chargers and the Jets both at 7-6. So that's the 3-team battle for that last spot in the playoff. I would assume Miami's not going to keep losing. I would assume they at least win 1 or 2 more games, at least 2 more games to get to 10, and they should be pretty solidified in a playoff spot. But it's going to come down to New England, Los Angeles, and the Jets for that number 7 spot. In the NFC, Philadelphia, they already clinched the playoff spot. They're most likely going to clinch the number 1 seed as well. They're 12-1. Minnesota, they're still the 2 seed at 10-3, but this is where there's implications come into play with that loss to the Lions and San Francisco destroying the Buccaneers. Minnesota's 10-3, 49ers are 9-4. So there's a chance that the Niners could leapfrog them because the Niners are the better team. They got off to a slow start as well. They were 3-4. They've won 6 straight. So definitely a big chance for them to get to that 2 seed. Which is really what you want. You want to be that 2 seed because then you play that 7 seed who could be the Giants, it could be Seattle, it could be Detroit potentially. But I think those are the teams you do want to play that are at that bottom spot of the playoff. So definitely a big chance for San Francisco to move it to that 2 seed with Brock Purdy as quarterback. Tampa right now is 6-7 at the number 4 spot. It's going to come down to Tampa and Carolina because Atlanta, they're 5-8. They're along as with Carolina, but I think Carolina's a better team right now. It's pretty sad to say, but Atlanta, they moved on from Mariota. They're going to Desmond Ridder as their quarterback. They had a bye week this week, so I don't really expect them. They were barely winning games with Mariota, anyways. I think Ridder can maybe do something similar to Mariota, but the fact that I just don't see him really winning games for them. It's not like they have a great defense or a great running game, so I think they're most likely out of it, and that's kind of why they did switch to Ritter, because they realized that they're probably not going to win this division despite it being so bad. But Carolina, they can run the ball, and that's all they need to do. They play the Steelers, the Lions, the Bucks, the Saints. Not the hardest, not the easiest schedule, but definitely winnable games. These next two games are at home, which I think helps. But if they could run the ball the way they did against Seattle, they ran for 220, I think it was, against Seattle in Seattle. I think you can go long ways because that defense can fly around. They can make plays. They can get to the quarterback. They can get interceptions. And as long as Darnold, who is the starting quarterback going forward, doesn't make mistakes through the air, which they don't really want him throwing the ball anyways, but as long as that running game is working, they can move the ball and they can score points. So honestly, you could really say they're a better team than Tampa, or at least on that level, because Tampa is awful. I think that's the first game we'll jump into. So just to recap, I went obviously 1-4, 31, 36, and 3 on the season. But we'll start with that Tampa-San Francisco game. Tampa just, despite having talent on their team, they can't do anything. I mean, even the defense was awful in this game. But the offense, even when they do get big plays, they get called back because of penalties. Or, if you remember that game where, Mike Evans is wide open for a touchdown and he drops it. This game, Mike Evans, literally the same exact thing. He's wide open for a touchdown, catches it, scores the touchdown, but they get called back because of a holding penalty. So even when things do go right, they go wrong. They definitely had chances in this game. It's not like they would have won, but at least make it closer, at least make it a little bit more competitive. Brady misses Evans in the end zone when he's wide open. Godwin, they think it's a pass interference call, doesn't get called. Just so many different things that happened that maybe could have changed it a little bit, not much, but just a little bit, but just didn't happen. But honestly, I think people would pick Carolina to win this division, despite being a game down. And despite being Carolina, who basically tried to give up and just traded all their guys away, their style of offense is better than Tampa's, and their defense, I wouldn't say is as good as Tampa, but it's close though. It's not like they're 20th and Tampa's in the top 10. It's very close. So that's going to come down to the wire between those two teams, which is crazy. But I think I think Tampa is the worst. If you were in the playoffs and you had Tampa to face, let's say they win the division, you face Tampa in that first week, which right now would be the Cowboys. Would you rather play Tampa, knowing they're probably a worse team than Carolina, but they have Brady? We could see what he could do in one game, despite having a bad team, bad offensive line, just whatever, all the disfiguration on that team. Would you rather face Brady in a one-game playoff situation or face possibly the better team, but even still, it's not a great team, and they're still under 500, but you're facing Sam Darnold in a playoff situation? I think you'd still rather face Carolina, but because of the Brady effect. But even still, it's close. I would gladly face either of these teams. The fact that one of them's going to win the division is just ridiculous because they're both awful. But it's close to who you would rather play, but we'll see what happens. Who does win that division? I said Carolina's schedule. Tampa, they play the Bengals this week. That's got to be a loss. They play the Cardinals, so they definitely get help that Murray's not going to play that game. But they're probably pretty even on level playing fields anyways in terms of just the teams themselves. Then they play the Panthers. So again, that's obviously the big game right there. And then they play the Falcons at the end of the season. So we'll see what happens with those games. Definitely going to come down to the wire, like I said. But we'll just have to keep an eye on that. But another playoff team that just got destroyed this week, the Titans. They lose 36-22 to the Jaguars at home, by the way. And this one, it's weird because they were up 14-7 at the end of the first quarter, and from that point on, it was just over. Really not even close, to be honest. So Jacksonville went from down 14-7 to up 33-14, just like that, and actually made it 36-14. So scored, 27 or 29 unanswered points against them. And Lawrence looked great. He's looked really good these last couple of weeks. Despite the loss to Detroit, he looked really good. It's just the defense could not stop them. But this game, 30-42, 368, 3 touchdowns, just looked really, really good. So definitely upside for Jacksonville. I think you have to I think you have to be confident knowing that the guy you took number one overall was just in such a bad situation last year. You got the pick right. It was just the dysfunctional, disgusting situation and culture and environment that he was had to deal with last year. So I think you have to be happy about that. Who knows? I mean, they could maybe run the table and get a playoff spot. It's not going to happen, but they definitely are. They're a long shot to getting that 7 seed, but technically they are still there. But Tennessee, I mean, just two really ugly losses. Now Philadelphia, you're in Philadelphia. They are obviously the better team, but still you got destroyed. This game, I mean, you basically got destroyed against the Jags despite being up 7 points after the first quarter. They play the Chargers, the Texans, the Cowboys, and the Jags again. They should be able to win this division. I mean, again, Jacksonville, they're 2 games technically behind them. They do play each other last week of the season. Who knows? I mean, that could be a game for that division. I would be very surprised just because I don't think Tennessee's that bad. But just the way they've looked these last 2 weeks, they've been awful. So I would be surprised if that last game did come down to the division. But, Tennessee, I think most people kind of had them this year. It's kind of falling off. They proved the people wrong early, but are we seeing that now? Is it we just took a lot of weeks to get there? I think that could be the case as well. So that could be a big game, that final game between these two teams. It will be in Jacksonville as well. People struggle to play in Jacksonville, so if it does come down to that, I would definitely bet Jacksonville. I mean, they're better at home. Teams just struggle when they play in there. It's hot. You're going down to Jacksonville. It's just something. It's just the aura, the essence of that, that stadium and that place. It just kind of haunts teams a little bit. So that could be a very exciting matchup. But other games from this week, we kind of touched on a lot of them, to be honest. But Jets Bills, I guess we didn't talk about that one. Bills win 20-12. Cold game, kind of snowing, raining in Buffalo. I talked about what the weather would look like there. Bills still haven't looked great. Allen's not looked amazing, to be honest. I don't know if it's still the elbow thing, if it's the weather, if it's what it is, but he still hasn't looked great. They're still, still number 1 seed. They're still 10-3. But they got to start looking a little bit better. I guess, the time to turn it on would be now. Because you have 4 games left, and then you have the playoffs. So it would be now to turn it on. They do play the Dolphins this week. Saturday night, we do start Saturday nights in the NFL this week, so that'll be exciting. But, then they play the Bears, the Bengals, the Patriots. So we'll see. I mean, they should still end up with the 1 seed. They should be able to win at least 3 out of 4 of those games, if not all of them. But they got to look a little bit better. The offense hasn't been as explosive and as dynamic as it's been earlier in the season, and it's been a trend these last couple weeks. But now is really the time where it's going to get cold. So teams coming to Buffalo, like that game against Miami this week's in Buffalo. I would not bet Miami. I mean, they only play in the warm, and there's no way they could handle the cold snow like that. I mean, in LA, Sunday Night Football. And again, in LA, they had heat warmers on the side because it was like 55 degrees. If you're going to be playing in Buffalo where it's going to be, at the most like 25 degrees, probably less than that, like 20, 10, 15 degrees in the snow. And they don't really like to run the ball anyways. I don't see how they come through in that game at all. But we'll have to see what happens there. But I guess other scores that I just didn't say, maybe I said the outcome, but Eagles win against the Giants 48-22. Hurts is probably the MVP. Obviously the team's record, but the way Mahomes played this last week, you can't say him. After the 3 picks, he has a lot of interceptions this year. Bengals, if they had a better record, I think you could argue Joe Burrow, but being 12-1, clearly the best team in the NFL the entire season. And the last 2 weeks he's put up monster games. It's going to be hard for him not to get it. He has to have a big collapse not to get it. But he's most likely the runaway MVP guy for this season. Ravens, I did say they won. They beat the Steelers 16-14. Again, another ugly game. That's just kind of what they do. But they did get the win. It was a big win because, again, the Bengals won. If they would have lost, they're 8-5. Bengals 9-4. And you could probably write the Bengals to win that division right then and there. But with them at least being tied, you can't say it fully yet. I think you're probably leaning 70% that way, maybe if not more. But you can't say it definitively yet. But yes, that was that game. The Panthers, I said they won 30-24 over Seattle. Just a bad loss for Seattle. They're fighting for that playoff spot. And they saw the Giants lost to the Eagles because Seahawks played the 4 o'clock window, Giants played the 1 o'clock window. You see them lose, you got to win that game against Carolina at home. They're right now the 8 seed. Giants have that last playoff spot, 7. So you win that game, you're 8-4, and the Giants are, or you're 8-5, excuse me, and the Giants are 7-5-1. So that's a huge loss for them because they really needed it. I said they started off good this year, but let's check back in a month or two. And what do you know what's happened? They've lost a lot of games. Geno's not been terrible, but definitely making more mistakes than he was before. The defense isn't playing as well. They've been getting killed on the ground recently. So that's what I was saying. They started off hot. They really shouldn't have been that good to start the season off. They just kind of just got the right sauce, I guess. But we kind of see what team they really are now, which is just losing a lot of games. That was it for the games this week. So. I guess one other injury that happened, I don't think it's season ending. I think he should be able to come back, but Debo did get injured in that 49ers win. I guess I haven't seen anything official, but it does seem like they do think he'll be able to return for the regular season, but he'll probably miss at least a game or two. I think it was an MCL sprain or an ankle or something like that. But that potentially could have been a big injury because I believe he got carted off the field. And it looked really bad. It looked like it could have been, a season-ending injury, which would have been huge because you're already down to Brock Purdy. He's looked good, but still, it's one game. You got to see it through a playoff stretch, these last couple games of the season. But despite having McCaffrey, Kittle, Ayuk, you need Debo. He does so many things for your offense. He's just a playmaker and X factor on that team, along with McCaffrey. But he's kind of that driving force of that team. He's kind of the heart and soul of that offense. So if they would have lost him, I think it would have come up huge in the playoffs. But at least it seems like he's going to be able to come back. So assuming he does, and he is at least 85% plus healthy, you got to be very happy with that. But that could have been a huge loss for them if he would have been out for the season. That was basically it for this week. Again, big week. It was a good week in terms of teams losing, injuries happening. That's not a good thing, but just stuff happening around the league. We'll look forward to the Week 15 preview video. So definitely check that out. It'll be out in a couple days from when you see this. And then check out the Cowboys video. Like I said, I didn't say the score of it, but it was 27-23 Cowboys. They did beat the Texans. Watch the video to see my full breakdown of the game. But I thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.